Hello, it's Paula again, the Working Whiskey Woman, and we're here to try 4 more new bourbon/whiskeys. Now, Cindy Sanders had put a comment on my cousin Lindsay's Facebook page about my thoughts on Traverse City whiskey. And she had a photo of actually this one, which is the American Cherry Edition. It's Bourbon Traverse infused with Traverse City cherries. And you'll see that in Michigan, in particular, we have a lot of these types which take advantage of the fruit or have some type of finish with it or some type of infusion. So this is truly a whiskey. And you can see the color in it. Actually, if you look at it, you see that there's a big cherry color. Now, you might notice the bottle is much smaller, and I wanted to point this out. There's a lot of times that you can just buy a smaller version of many of the things that we were already trying. Buffalo Trace, Eagle Rare, any one of them. This is a nice version. I bought this actually at the distillery outlet in Ferndale, Michigan. And it's a great way to try something without kind of spending a lot of money on a full bottle. This was actually relatively reasonable, but if they do offer basically half bottles, it's worth trying. So we'll take a look, and I know it's hard to see, but this one is pretty thick, pretty syrupy, which I would kind of expect from the cherry. Oh, and you can tell the cherry right off of the nose. It smells just like a cherry cobbler. You know, just a nice warm cherry cobbler with a little bit of that kind of like cinnamon oatmeal right on top with the brown sugar. And that continues on the taste. But the one thing I find about this with the bourbon is that while it's very cherry and it's really relatively sweet relative to most bourbon drinkers who've been drinking for quite a while, it is quite pleasant, especially for somebody who's relatively new. This wouldn't necessarily be my first choice because for me, it's just a little bit too cherry heavy. So let's see what happens when we put a little water on it. But it definitely tastes like a cherry pie or a cherry cobbler or something, you know, that reminds you of kind of that 4th of July barbecue, potluck, cherry kind of dish. And again, it's really a lot of cherry on it, a little bit more like wood on the end of it. So it's not really quite bitter, but it's just a little bit more of that wood, not oak type of flavor at the end. So Traverse City, and we're featuring Michigan today. I was going to go the different areas of Michigan, pretty much 3. This is the Traverse City area, which for those of you familiar with Michigan is located up in here, because this is how us Michiganders tell people where we live. So this one is actually a straight wheat whiskey, a barrel proof that they had at their distillery. And I really liked this one when we tried it originally. It's a signature edition. It's a relatively rare, limited edition. And we found it's a lot of fun. Now, one thing we've not talked about is wheat whiskey. So in whiskey and bourbon, remember we've got corn, which is the predominant grain, and then we have the malted barley, which of course is really important because that creates all the enzymes that actually, you know, get that alcohol and all those sugars going. And then you have a choice of either rye, which is a little bit more spicy. I personally find it a little bit more sweet. Or you'll have something like wheat, which is a little bit softer. I find that generally the wheat is, to me, a little bit more mainstream. It doesn't pull out a spice note or a sweet note, but it is a lot softer. And so especially for a lot of folks that are trying new bourbons, wheat is sometimes a nice way to go because it doesn't give you quite that zang that you'll get, you know, from a typical rye that's in a whiskey or a bourbon. And so in this one, you can see the difference in color already. There's the big cherry here, and in this one you can see that it's a lot more amber colored. It's a lot more golden, if you will. This one was aged for 4 years, and so as it would sit in the barrel, if it sat longer, you would see it would get darker and darker. So this is a really nice, the legs on this are a little different. It's not quite as stick syrupy, but it's got nice legs. I know you can't see it, but you'll see that they kind of drip right down. So there's a lot of good solids in this one. And on the smell, it really smells like autumn. It smells a lot of leaves. And it's really very much a more floral note. It's not grassy. You can definitely tell the wheat in it. And a little bit with that wheat, kind of like that baked bread kind of flavor, you know, that you'd get from a nice, good wheat bread. A little bit of that bran. So tasting wise, that's kind of coming through. You can definitely get the caramelization from the crust. Like when you have a nice piece of rustic white bread, that, you know, an artisanal one that's baked, you know, in one of those Firestone ovens, and you get that nice crust, that caramelization that happens with the combination of the yeast and the sugar actually from the wheat, just the naturalness of it. It just really comes out nice. It kind of really tastes like a lovely piece of crusty bread. It's also got a lot of smoothness to it. So it's got a little bit of clover, I would say, kind of like a nice butter. So it's definitely kind of like a really nice piece of buttered bread. And as you put the water in it, that kind of comes out, but it brings out a little bit more flavor into it. I'm starting to get a little bit more of the bran notes. It kind of changes into a little bit more of like that wheat, like a whole wheat kind of flavor. And that's one of the things you kind of want to look for too in a whiskey. So, well, the Traverse City is nice. It's kind of sweet. It's a little bit one note where it's just cherry, and that's kind of what you get. With the Traverse City wheat whiskey, it constantly changes. And that's the fun part about drinking whiskey or bourbon. Like when you drink a good one that you like, it should taste like something different all the time. It gives you just a different experience, and that's what makes it fun, completely fun. The next one is actually on the west side of the state in Holland. We're over here, for those of you not familiar with Michigan. And Coppercraft is basically, they use, I believe it's grain to bottle, and they're a great distiller. Sometimes what you'll find, by the way, in some of the states, and even in Kentucky, is many states may offer a Colorado-based whiskey, or Pennsylvania or something like that. But you have to be aware of that. Many times those are what they call MGP, which I keep forgetting. It's a Midwest grain product, and basically it's an Old Seagram's distillery, I believe, and they do a lot of the straight distilling, which they provide to many of these different houses, these places that basically just age their own barrels and then they bottle it for sale. That's not to say that that's not good. It is really good. So I do appreciate many of them. Some of them not so much, but in general, they produce a really fine product. But just be aware when it says distilled versus bottled. So this is the distiller, and so it'll really say on the back, well, this says produced and bottled. So, but normally that would say, if it just says bottled, that would mean that it was probably distilled in somewhere else, and the distillery or Coppercraft in this case would just be barreling it for themselves. This one is a lot of fun. They're a relatively new distillery in Michigan, and as you look, you can see they've got that nice golden color on there. This particular one doesn't have an age statement on it, but most likely most straight bourbons are generally at least 2 years. Remember, the bottle and bond is 4. So this one is nice. It's got a little bit of leg, not quite as much as what you see on the Traverse City, but at half the price, it's okay. So on this, I'm getting definitely more of that honey kind of clover notes on it. I'm getting a little bit of thyme in terms of, and a little bit of I'd even say a little bit of a sweet basil. So tasting it, It definitely tastes to me a little bit more like a garden, which isn't a bad thing. It's a really good thing. It's got that nice sweetness of that clover. I remember when I was a kid, we would go out and we would like pick the tops off of the purple flower, and we would kind of, you know, suck the ends because it would have that sweetness to it. And that, you know, was just really delicious, and it really makes me think of that. It's not that typical honey vanilla note, but it does have honey elements to it. It does make me think of maybe more of like an orange blossom honey as well. So in trying this, a little bit of water, 3 drops. Also, the same notes are kind of coming out, except a little bit more prominent now that we've kind of moved the alcohol and the glycol onto the side. And now I'm getting a lot more of a grassy note. More, again, that clover is really standing out. I'm getting not quite lemongrass. It's not necessarily a bad grass, but it's like a sweet grass type of, like a sweet grain type flavor. So that's a lot of fun. And now we're gonna go to the Southeast Michigan area, Detroitish area, right around here, right where near I live. And Ferndale, Michigan, you could call Detroit. And this is Mayor Pingree. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a huge Valentine fan. I think that they do a really exceptional job. The nice thing about them is that their motto is, we're not a local distiller, we're a global distiller that's located in the local area. So they really pay a lot of attention to their product. And the one thing I learned from Justin Aiden, the master distiller at Mayor Pingree, is if I give a comment about, oh, it's got honey, vanilla, caramel notes, he's like, that's not what I want to hear, because everything tastes like that. I want to hear what different things you get, what different flavors come off, what kinds of things are you experiencing? Do you get a different flavor from one sip to the next? And that's what's so exciting about what I find about Mayor Pingree in the local area. I would dare say that this one probably competes with anything you'll get in Kentucky. I know that they have a 7-year, it's called Blue Label, and that is one of the best that I've ever tried. It is, in my books, slightly above Blanton's, sorry Freddie Johnson, but it's a really, really good one. So in this particular case, again, this one has been aged for, I think this is a straight. So when it says straight, it generally means 2 years. It can mean longer. In this particular case, I'm going to assume straight is the 2. Sorry, Justin, if I got it wrong. But you can see that it's a little bit lighter because it's not aged as long. So for example, you can see that actually it's quite close to color as the Traverse City that's aged in 4. So I might be more like 4, but I could be wrong, but Justin will correct me. So in this one, this is really different. This has got more of definitely a perfume, like a sweet violet perfume. It actually reminds me of lilac and lilies of the valley. So it's a very spring type of flavor to it, a really spring nose. And trying it. Wow, there's a lot of things that are going on at once. There's a lot of a floral, that lilac, that violet is coming out. And when I say violet, that's a good thing. Actually, violets are edible flowers, and oftentimes you'll see them sometimes, especially in Europe or in places that specialize in more herbal types of delicacies and treats. You'll get like basically a crystallized violet, which is just basically you put sugar on a violet, and it's got a really unique flavor. It's got elements of lavender, so thanks Justin, because that's what I love to see. It's definitely got that lavender kind of cool, calm type thing going on. That's not to say that that's the only one note's going on. There's a lot of other things happening in it. I'm going to put a little water in it. And this is just the newest release that just came out. Oh, now this is really interesting because now I am definitely getting more of what I would say a local honey flavor, which again, local honey, can be very different from space to space. If you get one that's from bees that are mostly, you know, off of lavender or mostly off of orange blossom, but this is definitely mostly off of a wildflower. It definitely has wildflower elements to it. And now that I put a little water with it, I really like the way that the finish is. What they'll tell you is that it's called that Kentucky hug, or it's that hug. That hug there is just that nice little squeeze of somebody who's just not going to let you go. It just has that nice type of, like, just general hazelnut type of thing that sits in the palate. One of the things I like to describe when I describe wine, or especially whiskey, is one that's haunting. And that's one where I'll be trying several different ones, and I'll leave, and maybe a couple hours later go, damn, I should have bought a bottle of that. It was really, really good. So those are the ones from Michigan. But the one thing that Valentine has, in fact, with the bourbon, is they have just started to release cocktails. And so I talked a little bit about the old fashioned. This is actually, since it's about 4 ounces, this is actually 2 servings. And my friend Heather Dilly, I'm a Heather super fan for my Valentine, gonna admit. And she basically was making these as cocktails to go. This is a lovely little pandemic treat that you can get yourself. Just stop by. And it's a lot of fun. This one, you have to have 2 people drinking it. So I'm going to have some, and I'm going to get a glass. Ooh, this is his favorite one. For my sweet, sweet partner, Tim, or I like to call him Cabana Boy. He doesn't really like that, so I use bourbon sommelier in front of the boys. So, big ice, don't forget. We don't want to use the chipped. Waters it down a little bit too much, and then you lose all that flavor. And let's talk about cherries. So Cindy had about cherries. Traverse City sells some premium cherries, but they're aged in the whiskey. And you'll see that a lot of times people will buy ones that are aged in whiskey. And that's okay. But honestly, I'm of mixed mind. So it could be a little fun, but that whiskey flavor of whatever they were aged in kind of imparts itself to the whiskey that you're drinking. And if it's a really different brand or really different type, it kind of makes it a little bit not so much more fun. So this is one that's really that's accepted in anywhere, and you'll see this in many of the high-end places, Townhouse, you know, any of the high-end restaurants. This is Luxardo. It's usually considered the standard. These are maraschino cherries, and you'll see, if I can open it, which I can't, generally this is a really syrupy type of flavor to it. But as you know, as I said the first time, my favorite is my own, which is basically I just take Michigan cherries and I can them in simple syrup. And given that this is a lovely Ferndale, Michigan-based product with, I know, this is also a Michigan-based grain, and they just started to do that. Valentine produced some really wonderful bourbons and whiskeys, but they had to basically source from Indiana. And they still tasted really good, but it's really fun now. Sorry, my spoon dropped. It's really fun now because now they're featuring Michigan. And at first, some of the Michigan ones I was trying, I was like, oh, I'm not really sure the grain works here. But actually, we're getting a lot better and better about that. So, as you can see, part for me. And part for my partner. And we're just going to go up to the pool and have a lovely little evening. Thanks so much. Sorry for all the little bells and whistles going on here. But thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for signing up to the channel for Working Whiskey Women. And I hope to see you again soon. Cheers.